This is the Vermont Legislature's House Committee on Environment and Energy. We are convening a meeting to hear a proposal of amendment on H126 from Representative Parsons. Welcome, Representative Parsons.
Thank you for having me. So it's not a lot of them, an amendment. It doesn't change a whole bunch. It's all takes place in section 3. I'm just trying to alleviate some of the concerns that people have out there in rural districts as to how this moves forward. And I also share those concerns. And some of that can be, I think, slightly achieved with this language. And bear with me on my First Amendment. So the first section of amendment is, well, let me just say.
Oh, gosh, we don't have it posted. Did you? Okay, but it needs to be up on our webpage.
So I should ask if everyone has.
You don't have it. Oh, I'm sorry. It went to the whole.
Okay.
I'll forward it.
Gotcha.
I'll just send it to you right here.
Nigel sent it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Take it. Did you get it?
I got it. I just put it up.
Maybe you could just articulate the concerns that you're trying to address.
The main concern is number one, the First Amendment. The concern would be that sometimes we say there's a study being done or we're gathering information. And we point to here's the information we're gathering. And we say they're going to collect that, but that's the goal, is that they're going to collect it. But when you read the language, it doesn't actually say they're going to collect it in maybe the breakdown you might want. They might put in a larger format where it's harder, then you have to come through and try and break it all down and everything. When you could simply just say, and here's one of the breakdowns we'd like when you present that information. So the first section, I'm guessing it would be the intent of gathering the language that see here.
Great, thank you. And gathering the information about what's out there for public and private conserved land and everything. This just adds that and break it down by county so that when it shows up, it is broken down by county. Are they going to do that? Quite possibly. Does it tell them to do that? No. So all this does is say when the information comes back, they're broken down by county as well. The second one is more of the concern, which I may have alluded to yesterday, which was that when this information comes back, if we're looking around the state, we have 2-3 counties that are already meeting this 30 by 30 goal, that we don't look to them and say, I know you're 30% conserved. That's our goal. But in order to pick up the slack, you need to be 50% conserved by 2030. So it basically just puts out there in section 3 under 2804, it strikes out number 2 and replaces it. But the reality is it just adds language onto the end of it. It keeps the original language and then adds on, which should include a geographically equitable distribution of conserved land, so that we don't have that instance where we're saying we want to be 50 by 50. And in reality, we're telling certain parts of the state, you need to be 50 by 2030. In other parts of the state, you don't even have to be 30 by 30. So it just a little more equitable around the locations for multiple reasons. One being, I know we're a small state.
But being able to access the lands, I think, is one of the benefits of having conserved land, is for people to public lands to be accessible. And if people are here and the land's over here, it's really easy for these people to access all that land. It's conserved, not so much for these people. So making sure that it's spread around the state in a more even fashion, I think, is important for many reasons. So those are my two amendments. It says, I just caught this just barely. It says which should include. My intention was shall include. If that's we'd prefer to keep it should, and we'll accept it. I would prefer shall, but I'm fine with either, really. Doesn't change it all that much for me. So I'm completely fine with just leaving it as well, though I may have intended shall. So yeah, any questions?
Members have questions, Representative Morris.
Thank you, Representative, for coming in. I'm wondering if you can explain a little bit about how you're trying to achieve geographical equitable distribution of conserved lands when some counties don't have national forests. They don't have the connectivity of forest to go from the southern part of the state or below Vermont into the Appalachians up through, we're trying to protect that connectivity as well.
Yep.
And there's a couple of examples, like Franklin County or perhaps even Chittenden County don't have the forest that the Northeast Kingdom or Essex County, for example, or has. And then even in Windsor County, we don't have the national forest or those types to be equitable related to those counties that do have the national or state forest. So I'm wondering how you would propose that 30% of Franklin County would be conserved when they don't have the forest, or Chittenden County.
Yeah. I really understand that it's going to be challenging for some areas a little more than others. But I also understand that part of the goal is what we do is we work with private landowners to conserve that land. If the counties that you're referencing don't really have those big natural town forests, maybe those counties do have the private landowners who are looking to conserve their land. And maybe as opposed to funding the conservation of more private property in other towns, we use that funding resources to conserve the private lands, the people who want to conserve their private lands, instead of using that money spread out all over everywhere. We focus on those areas that just don't naturally have the large open spaces, but they do have private lands with people that want to put them in permanent conservation. And that's how that's where we direct those funds to, because that's how you get the land to where you want it, as opposed to conserving private lands in a county that's already met the goal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Representative Tory.
Comment. I really like your thinking about access to conserved land, because we did learn how much value having conserved lands in your towns brings. And so it is something that, we want to see broadly across the state. But we also learned that a big focus of this effort is strategic conservation. And that has more to do with the connectivity that we heard from Brett Morris, these key linkages. And I think that would be a harder thing to be geographically equitable about, because it's so distinct based on wildlife corridors and other issues. So just one thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And I throw a plug out there. I have a bill on your wall that may be taken on its face different than its intent. Let me just say that, and it understands that factor as well. Living out in an incredibly rural area, and slowly making my way into the more populous part of town every day. Very well aware as somebody who is going snowshoeing this weekend, loves hunting, is in the woods a bunch. Sometimes when we think of those wildlife corridors and those connected habitats, that's more us thinking about them as opposed to the wildlife. Certainly, you're not going to have very diverse wildlife in downtown Burlington. Well understood. But when you have a bunch of 10-acre lots and everyone's got 80% of their lot wooded and lawns and this, a lot of the people in rural areas, actually self-included, we put up apple trees, things like that, to actually have the wildlife there. So I see more deer walking through my lawn sometimes than I do sitting in my tree stand out in the woods. So they're not necessarily, I understand it, but at some point we're putting our own spin on the wildlife. They just fine crossing my lawn, and I have all kinds of everything, but that's not this. So.
Representative Sibilia.
Yes, thank you, Representative Parsons, for bringing this and looking for ways to make this more palatable. And the first suggestion that you have, we're asking for more data. That seems reasonable. I am struggling a little bit with the county level implementation, because what I've learned in here is we really need to look at the biophysical regions across counties. And I'm happy to share that with you. Also, that is the piece that's a little bit challenging for me. And I understand what the concern is, and I would share it. But I also think that when we look at the biophysical regions and the data that you're asking for in the first part of your amendment, it does shine a light if we are focusing too much. But just some thoughts for you, and thank you for engaging, trying to make this more palatable for yourself and others.
That was actually my comment on the first instance of amendment, is we don't do it too much based on our counties in Vermont, and the intention here is to consider things by biophysical region. And so like, I guess if we did want to make a change in that kind of regard, it would include, for me, it wouldn't be county based, but it would be biophysical region based, which is, it is different than a county, but it's geographically distributed. And it is the underlying intention of using Vermont conservation design to guide this process. Representative Smith.
Thank you. We had a number of witnesses from the state of Vermont that expressed very clearly that they will keep all of their lands that they own open to hunting and fishing and the sports that we have. And I can, and with no attachments to it. And I do like the idea. We all know that Chittenden County cannot produce as much with preserved land as the counties in the Northeast Kingdom can. And it's already been proven. In Chittenden at 8% and the Northeast Kingdom at 43% already. I think it would be a good piece of information for all of the Vermonters to know if Chittenden County in 2030 was still at 8%, they didn't put much of an effort into it. Well, another county might have increased, Franklin County or Bennington County, if they increase, I think it would be great information for all the Vermonters to know that everybody's trying to do what they can. Just for an information package. So I like the idea. Nobody's going to be penalized if they don't achieve it, but at least people would see that it looks like these folks in Bennington County are working hard to achieve this. Or
Representative Logan.
Thank you. I think everyday people would find having the information broken out by county and, information that they can understand, that they can map on with their mind already. And maybe even in addition to the biophysical regions to both be helpful, so people could make that translation from county to biophysical region. And so I am not significantly opposed to the first piece of the amendment. I'm not exactly clear on in the second case about what the claim of inequity might be by geography. If it is, we heard the floor conversation yesterday. Is it about access to conserved lands that are in proximity to where you live? Or does it have more to do with, the land being conserved, the percentage of land being conserved in a particular area and the economic impacts of that on the region? I'm just not clear what is inequitable,
The access,
essentially inequitable.
yeah, the access really, I mean, at least I can only speak for myself. I could only give you glowing reviews of the ability to walk out your door and walk through the back of your property and you're in your town forest in 5 minutes of 636 acres. Or you go 5 miles up the road and there's another beautiful piece of land. I understand people enjoy it, but the ability to have close proximity to places like that is monumental to me. I really do. And if we say that this group of people is now, an hour or two away from all this great stuff, and we could have, if possible, like I said, I understand there's going to be challenges in certain areas, but if we could have put more effort into, bringing that closer, I have an analogy I'll leave out.
Okay, I think I would just be opposed to the should maybe, or even shall language as a representative for Burlington. I think what people in my district want to see is actually, increased density of housing. Certainly access to green space is really important for folks in Burlington. But rewilding a city when we know that that tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people are going to be moving to Vermont. And what we should be doing is making public transit, access to jobs, access to affordable housing in dense urban settlements, more what Burlington looks like going forward. That's why I find this plan description as it's written so valuable, is because it preserves those places of historic settlement, pushes as far as we can to preserve biodiversity and provide access to conserved lands for Vermonters, but also recognizes that we need to live and work here too. And hundreds of thousands more people will be living and working here going into the future decades if climate change
Do
predictions.
members have more questions for Representative Parsons?
Just a comment that just kind of thinking, if we were starting from scratch, I would agree with this. And I think actually implicit in this is conserving all of the appropriate lands within each of the regions of the 9 identified regions. I'm just worried that this language is kind of confusing and a little bit inconsistent with what the bill is trying to do, because in some cases it's not going to be possible for it to be equitable on the level you're talking about. And actually, I say that as somebody, I want every ounce of conserved land we can get in Bennington County. I'll take it anywhere under any circumstances. I want it. But because it's open, it's almost always been open to the public. It preserves it for all the activities we spent a lot of time yesterday. There's all the things that I think all of us actually, fundamentally agree with. But I'm just worried that this language isn't quite consistent with the way the bill is written, and it could cause confusion. That even though I
I get it, and actually it is in some ways the goal. Because it is to identify according to the Vermont Conservation Design, which was put together by Fish and Wildlife and the Forest and Parks, to do the right things, actually with an emphasis on getting as much as we can within all of the regions that make sense and really are consistent with Vermont Conservation Design. I just worried that this language is a little inconsistent.
Are you referring to the county percentages or the other part of it?
The second part.
Okay.
And, the county, on the one hand, if whoever said it's the way people think is by county, because we do, to some extent, and if that's a useful bit of information, because people will kind of instinctively understand it, I'm okay. I think I'm okay with that as part of the inventory, as long as it's also by region as well, because that's the real thing. But I'm worried the second part is just not consistent with the way the bill is written. We'd have to go back and do a lot to make it be consistent.
I would also, I think, I appreciate the concern about geographic distribution and share an interest in it, and would say it's part of the planning process, which is, it is less articulated here, the specifics of that planning process, because it's going to be driven by the very diverse stakeholders who are going to be part of it. And so I would expect that they will be guiding that and having to grapple with that question of the challenge of what was just well articulated by Representative Logan and Bongartz. Representative Smith.
If the word may was in there, would that be a better feeling?
It's just,
I mean,
it's too, just not.
So at this point, what we would do is say, are there further questions for Representative Parsons? And I'm not seeing any. And so thank you for joining us, and you can stay in the room if you like, but we'll deliberate and decide what our path forward is.
I appreciate your time. I really do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other thoughts on this, members? Representative Pat.
I just, in terms of, I understand the desire for sort of equitable distribution of the responsibility around the state. County lines there are a lot of problems with that. I'm just thinking of where I live in the northern tier of Washington County. Middlesex, Worcester, and Woodbury in a row have huge amounts of currently conserved forest land. Huge. However, also a very large part of that crosses the county line into Lamoille County. And how do you, it's an arbitrary political boundary that was drawn once upon a time for whatever reasons that was drawn at that time, but it doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of trying to measure conserved forest land. So that's, and I imagine that occurs in other places around the state.
Representative Clifford and
Thank you, ma'am.
Simmons.
Oh, I guess what I'm hearing in the conversation is that perhaps the first section would be doable, but people have concerns with the second.
I think I think we're open to maybe something. That's a good summary of where we are right now, I think. And so did you want to comment on your thoughts?
No, that's just.
Yeah, thanks. Representative Stebbins.
Maybe I should have asked Representative Parsons this, and maybe it was just too late a night for me. So is the concern that, what I think I'm hearing him say is that the concern is that some counties will be asked to make up the difference for other counties.
That was one of them.
Yeah. But then I also heard him say that doesn't want to lose access, so that maybe if a portion of the land were to be permanently, the top tier, that perhaps, we're not supposed to be, backcountry skiing in or hunting, that would not be accessible. Did other people? Was that also what he was saying? So it was kind of a bit of both?
I think it's both.
Okay, I mean, it's a really, I find this a very fuzzy, what is inequity? I mean, frankly, it's inequitable that my kid lives in an urban area. That's something I chose.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely no way Chittenden County is ever going to have the natural bounty of some of the other counties in this state. So, I mean, I'd love to say, yes, let's figure out how Chittenden County can get to 30%, but I don't think it's because they're not going to be trying.
I don't either.
It's more, it's also like, where do we want to put the houses in the most pristine places? I think we want to put more of the people's stuff where the people's stuff are. So I guess I find this a really interesting, I don't know how like it's interesting. I guess I would say, given this level of fuzziness, I don't know how you move forward with the second instance of amendment because I don't think it's possible given our current land use practices. I also don't think anybody would prefer that we choose to do increased development farther from urban centers because there might be some, paved lot that started to grow some forest that we tried to conserve when actually that has no biological value whatsoever. So I would be, I mean, if it helps people to see what the breakdown is by county, that's fine with me, even though it's a bit of an apples and an oranges, given that this is really about bioregions. But the second one I really struggle with because it's really not about who's doing their part. It's about what is really most valuable and how then do we have the conversations to preserve that for the future.
Representatives Sibilia and Smith.
Yeah, so I have to go back and reread the second instance of amendment. And the first instance, again, it's not, I mean, it's gathering data. It isn't how we measure, but it seems not unreasonable. The second, the second is in our, it's not in the inventory, it's in the plan, it's in the plan. And so what we're adding is, so the implementation methods for achieving the vision and goals of this chapter using conservation, Vermont conservation as a guide is in there. And then we would add, which should include a geographically equitable distribution of conserved land. And so it doesn't say county, it says geographically. And so I went back and, you all will have a better sense of this. But when we think about geographically and we think about the biophysical regions, I mean, those are geographically different. We do have targets in each of those places. And so, I mean, it's sort of what we're doing.
That's what we're doing.
So then for me, if it's what we're doing, I'd say yes.
Well, because what I'm hearing and I wrote when I got the language was, what does this mean? First of all, I think it's really like what, and others have already articulated well. It's not currently geographically distributed equitably. I don't, at least by the common understanding of what equitable might mean. And so then we have, there's just more conserved land in certain towns than other towns. And most folks think of that as a pretty big asset in their town. And what are the ramifications that we haven't considered? It's like, I just think it's too prescriptive in this section of the bill where we have tried, I think, with sincerity, to open it up to other feedback we got of, can we let Vermonters drive this process? So I think having faith in that, what we have there as the foundation is where I would head on this. I don't know who's next. Representative Smith.
I think this entire amendment is more of an informational amendment than a mandatory. There's no mandatory in it. And somebody just mentioned a minute ago that it wouldn't be a bad idea to to see what percentages the counties do.
And I would offer that, given our state of GIS technology, you could do that in a New York second once you had the inventory completed. So this is sort of like, we are spending a lot of time on something that can happen pretty much almost instantaneously once we have that inventory done. And
I
so,
think the amendment is fine. And maybe it should be could instead of should.
Representative Sadkowitz on that.
I was gonna make that same point about the GIS, that adding in the county data should be perfectly trivial if it's not automatically included. So it's hard to see how that part of the amendment really adds anything of substance. And then the second part, the other, I agree with a lot of what I heard, and I just wanted to also point out that, oh gosh, I just lost my train of thought. That if this bill was actually going to be forcing landowners to participate, then I think it would have a lot more weight. But given the fact that it's completely voluntary, having to take into account the sort of the human aspect of what would be equitable would put constraints on how we would be able to put together such a plan, which I think could make it very much more difficult to actually come up with a plan. And given the other comments about the sort of vagueness about what it would really mean to be equitable, it seems like it would just create a barrier which would undermine what we're really trying to do here with the bill as a whole, which is to preserve the biological integrity of our state.
Right.
Just, you were gonna say something.
Oh, yeah, just briefly, I don't support the amendment. I don't think it's necessary. We actually have already instructed that the planning process to take equity considerations into account. And so I believe that they will be taken into account.
Just to follow up on that, you remember that it says increase equitable access to protected.
Right.
And
it's in there.
And the other thing is just so that follows up on Representative Logan's point, but the other one is that Vermont Conservation Design is the Vermont Conservation Design, and it has the regions and the areas that we're seeking to protect identified. And to then somehow translate that into counties of reasons, just it doesn't, it's not, and I feel badly because I don't want to just check what he's saying, but because that's not really what we're doing. I think it's more that it's in many ways already in here, and we have to do it in a way that comports with the real goal of this bill, which is to maintain biodiversity through all the mechanisms that we're seeking to achieve.
Okay.
And for what it's worth, I take the equitable part. You can look at that. It depends on your starting point. My starting point is equitable as I want more because it's good.
Yeah.
And others have different, but it's that's another.
Right.
But anyway, those 2 points I think are
I like open land. I like woods, and I prefer to see that. But I thought I heard Representative Logan say you liked the amendment a little while ago.
Oh, I just, I would agree with others who say presenting the information at the county level, cool, also easy to do.
Sure.
Also doesn't need to be,
It
doesn't need.
like, okay, folks, we need to get back to the
just
floor.
I know that-
I think
quickly, I
we're-
was just gonna say, the regional planning commissions are part of the stakeholder engagement, and they're the closest we get to county level, and they're part, and they can reflect back. It's gonna be in the regional plans, it's gonna be incorporated. So I also don't think the amendments necessary.
So just looking, I see where everybody's going with the second part, but anybody comfortable with the first or not?
I don't think it's necessary. It's not adding any substantive things that would indicate the need for an amendment from where I sit. So
I would disagree.
Yeah.
May I tell you why? a year or two down the road, if we come back to this study and look at it, and we're at 56 or 57% in the Northeast Kingdom, and Chittenden County is still at 8%, I'm not going to be very happy about that, because they're going to present no drive to try to improve that 8%, and they don't need to. I just for informational purposes, I think it would be a good idea so that everybody would know that. And I don't mean to just keep using Chittenden County. I'd just like to see a percentage grow. And, you know, if Chittenden went to 10 and the Northeast Kingdom improved, two points is better than 0 points. And I think it would behoove every Vermonter to know that everybody's putting an effort into it, even if we only just support 1/2 of this amendment.
All right. All we can do is take a straw poll on this one. So
Oh, really? We don't make a motion?
it's not in our possession. Yeah.
I just, having this conversation has been interesting to me. It's triggered another thought. And we keep talking about the difference between Essex County and Chittenden County. And they've done their effort. We haven't done it over here. In our expectations to capture conserved land, I don't think we included airports. So for instance, in South Burlington, we're not going to develop or conserve Burlington Airport. It has a footprint. It's animals aren't going to be there. People aren't going to have access to walk the property for recreational. But it is a piece of land that's in a sense conserved from development.
I don't know. I just have to interrupt you and say I don't agree with that. And they're very much developed. And so I'm not sure where you're headed, and you're welcome to continue talking, but I would say
it's acres of property
that are intended for.
Are they included in the conserved land count?
No.
It can't be developed because
No,
you
it
can't put
is
a house on a
developed.
runway.
It is developed.
The runway's not developed.
That is impervious surface.
Residential development.
Impervious surface for me is a change in the natural land cover, which from.
That's a difference of opinion, Madam Chair, I think. But and like the causeway on in the Riverwalk, are those captured in the conserved land? They're
Not under this bill, Representative.
But the shorelands are, and that's an area that Chittenden County can keep.
Do folks have continued discussion on this amendment? All right, so.
Yeah, I just found it really helpful to pull Eric Sorensen's presentation back up and look at the biophysical regions. I'll just say that. And I also shared it with Representative Parsons.
Great. Yeah. And I expect that once we get the inventory, we can, data can be parsed by any geographic region that suits folks. So,
That's a quick question.
yes.
When we do report outs, because this is an example where a map would have been really helpful during the report out. Do we ever have the ability
Never.
to use tech? We don't.
No. You can't,
You could print it.
you could print it and distribute it. Yes, that's right. Thank you.
Because I think this is a case where seeing is helpful.
All right. So I guess I'll ask the question. All of those in favor of the amendment? All those, that's 2. All those opposed to the amendment? That's 9. Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
could you do a straw poll on the first half of this amendment?
We could do that.
Just for the heck of it?
Like a short
It
straw?
may not change a thing, but it may. I don't know.
Can we have a?
Brian, we're gonna have that data. We're absolutely gonna have it. This map putting amendment doesn't really make it more likely that we're gonna have that data. Because of the way these systems, the GIS systems within which all this data is gonna be put, it's gonna be trivial to break it down by county. The GIS folks know where the county lines are. That's all really well known. We're gonna be able to do exactly what you want.
Yeah.
Representative Pat.
Just procedurally, I mean, when we say how we voted, we have to respond to the
Amendment.
entire proposal as presented, not, some of us may less objection or support one piece of it, but not the other, but we're voting on the whole thing.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. Thank you all for